You ever wonder why something keeps rising even when everything around it is trying to pull it down? Why something grows not in comfort but in criticism? Why Islam, yes, it is spreading fast in the West. Let me tell you something they don't want you to know. This ain't about trends. This ain't about propaganda. This is about truth. Leans in, more intense. People are waking up. Not to noise, but to silence. Not to chaos, but to peace. You see, the Western world told its people you can have it all. Big house, fast car, flashy clothes. But they never told them what it cost. Their souls. People got full wallets but empty hearts. Followers on social media but no one to follow in real life. And then they come across something different. Not loud, not flashy, but real. Islam. A faith that doesn't bend to desires, that doesn't adjust itself to fit your comfort. It calls you up. It challenges you. It says discipline over desire, submission over ego, truth over trends. Pause, you know why they fear it. Because it's not just a religion, it's a way of life. A life of purpose, a life of service, a life of meaning. And meaning is dangerous to a system built on distraction. Voice rises with fire. They painted Islam with fear, tried to lock it behind headlines. But what happens when people stop listening to the noise and start reading the Quran for themselves? What happens when they meet a Muslim who shows them respect, humility, and strength? What happens when they feel that peace in sujood, when their forehead touches the ground? I'll tell you what happens. They change, because truth, my friend, doesn't need marketing. It speaks, it pulls, it transforms firmly, and no matter how hard they try to hide it, truth finds its way. That's why Islam is growing. That's why hearts are turning. Not because of what the media says, but because of what God says. And when the soul hears it, it recognizes home. In today's modern world, especially in the West, people are surrounded by comfort, luxury, and seemingly endless opportunities. There are more conveniences now than ever before in human history. Smartphones that connect us instantly, entertainment on demand, access to education, freedom of speech, and platforms to express opinions. On the surface, it seems like people should be the happiest they've ever been. But beneath all of that comfort, there's a growing restlessness, an emotional and spiritual void that technology, money, and fame can't seem to fill. People are searching for something deeper, something real, something eternal. That search leads many of them, often quietly and away from the public eye, to Islam. Western societies have promoted the idea that happiness lies in individualism, chasing your passions and doing whatever feels good. From a young age, people are taught to follow your heart, live your truth, and do what makes you happy. But when those same people grow up and chase those dreams, many of them still find themselves lying awake at night, feeling an emptiness they can't explain. They try to fill it with work, relationships, social media validation, material possessions, or even drugs and alcohol. But nothing seems to touch that deep, aching void inside. That's when the questions start. What is all this for? Why am I here? Is this really it? Is life just about chasing goals, then dying? It is in that silence and that internal struggle where Islam enters not through noise or flashy marketing, but through truth. Unlike other ideologies that change with trends, Islam stands firm with a message that has remained unchanged for over 1,400 years. You were created by one God for a purpose, and your soul will never be truly at peace until it reconnects with its creator. That message hits people in the heart because it answers questions they've been asking their whole lives. Islam doesn't just give information, it gives direction. It doesn't offer temporary comfort, it offers eternal clarity. Many converts to Islam say they were first drawn in by the discipline. The structure of 5 daily prayers, the intentional fasting in Ramadan, the modest dress code, the prohibition of intoxicants, all of it initially seems restrictive to someone raised in a do-what-you-want culture. But as they explore deeper, they realize it's not about restriction, it's about protection. Islam puts boundaries around the human being to guard their heart, mind, and soul from self-destruction. It gives purpose to everyday actions and turns ordinary life into a form of worship. Even drinking water or smiling at someone becomes an act of goodness. That's powerful in a world where people are desperate to feel like their lives mean something. People in the West are also increasingly disillusioned by organized religion. Many have seen institutions failed and churches involved in scandals, religious leaders preaching one thing and doing another, so they turn away from religion altogether. But when they discover Islam, they often find a different experience. There's no hierarchy between a person and God. You don't need a priest to confess your sins. You don't need someone else to validate your faith. It's just you and your Creator directly. That simplicity, that purity is something people crave without even knowing it. Another reason Islam reaches the spiritually empty is because it doesn't sugarcoat the human condition. It acknowledges struggle. It accepts that life is hard, that tests are part of the journey. But it also teaches that these tests have meaning. Every hardship is either a purification or a preparation. Islam doesn't offer a fantasy of constant happiness. It offers something more powerful, inner peace, even in the middle of chaos. It teaches that true success isn't in this life, but in the life to come. That idea that this world is temporary and the real home is the hereafter gives people hope. And hope is something that's in short supply these days. People often stumble upon Islam not because they were seeking religion, but because they were seeking truth. They read the Quran out of curiosity, listen to a lecture, meet a Muslim coworker, or scroll past a clip online that makes them pause. And in that moment of pause, in that quiet space between doubt and desire, something starts to shift. The heart begins to recognize something it's been missing: submission. Not the kind that weakens a person, but the kind that sets them free from ego, from confusion, from loneliness. Islam gives people a framework, a compass, a lifeline. In a world full of noise, it speaks with timeless clarity. And once someone tastes that clarity, they don't want to go back to the confusion. For decades, the dominant narrative about Islam in the West has been one of fear, suspicion, and distortion. Mainstream media, political rhetoric, and Hollywood have all contributed to a particular image of Islam, one that portrays it as foreign, oppressive, violent, or backwards. Muslims have often been reduced to caricatures: the angry protester, the silent veiled woman, the terrorist. These portrayals have created a cloud of misunderstanding that hangs heavily over public perception. But something fascinating is happening. Despite these negative portrayals, or perhaps because of them, people in the West are starting to question the story they've been told. They're realizing that maybe the Islam they were shown isn't the real Islam at all. In the age of information, ignorance is becoming a choice. It only takes a few clicks for someone to read the Quran in their own language, to listen to a Muslim scholar explain the beauty of prayer, to hear a convert speak about how Islam changed their life. And when people begin to do their own research, when they go beyond the headlines and the fear tactics, they often find something that surprises them. They find a faith rooted in peace, mercy, justice, and discipline. They find a religion that places immense value on family, charity, morality, and community. They find a message that makes sense, not just emotionally, but intellectually. One of the biggest misconceptions people have is that Islam is spread by force. That couldn't be further from the truth. In the modern context, most people embracing Islam in the West do so quietly, privately, and after months, sometimes years of deep thought and reflection. No one forces them. In fact, many face backlash from their families, friends, and even their careers. But they still take that step because what they've discovered resonates with something deep inside them. It's not about being Arab or wearing certain clothes. It's about connecting with God in a way that feels real and complete. It's about finding answers to the questions they've carried for years. Another myth that's starting to break down is the idea that Islam oppresses women. This one has been especially powerful in Western media. But when Western women themselves begin to study Islam, many are shocked to find that the Quran gave women rights centuries before the West even considered them. Rights to education, inheritance, divorce, and respect. They discover that modesty isn't about hiding, it's about dignity. They see Muslim women choosing to wear the hijab not because someone made them, but because it represents strength, control, and devotion. And once those misconceptions start to fall away, people begin to ask, if the media was wrong about this, what else were they wrong about? That question becomes the key. Once that door is cracked open, it often leads to a journey of self-reflection and exploration. People start reading the Quran with fresh eyes. They start listening to Muslim speakers, not to debate, but to understand. They begin to see the universality of Islam's message: worship one God, live righteously, do good to others, prepare for the hereafter. It's not foreign. It's not extreme. It's the same call that prophets like Moses, Abraham, and Jesus brought. Islam just reaffirms that message and completes it through the final prophet, Muhammad, peace be upon him. One reason Islam continues to spread despite the negative PR is because of the character of ordinary Muslims. It's not always the scholars or public speakers who bring people to Islam. It's the neighbor who's always kind, the co-worker who never gossips, the friend who's honest, generous, and humble. People may not remember a verse you quote, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And when someone consistently lives their faith with sincerity, it plants a seed. Many converts say they became curious about Islam after seeing how a Muslim carried themselves, especially during hardship. It's not about perfection, it's about principle. And principle is rare in a world driven by popularity and profit. The truth is, the more people are told not to look into Islam, the more curious they become. There's a famous saying, if you want to keep people away from something, just demonize it. But when that demonization becomes too obvious, it has the opposite effect. People begin to wonder why so much effort is being made to silence a message. And when they investigate for themselves, many find something they didn't expect, something beautiful, something logical, something timeless. Islam speaks to both the mind and the soul, and that's not something that can be hidden forever.
Scale your email marketing efforts with automation. One example is to send an automated series of emails to
There's a reason why people can't ignore the Quran once they've truly encountered it. Not glanced at it, not read about it in an article or seen it quoted out of context, but truly open it, sat with it, and let the words speak. Because it doesn't read like anything else. It's not structured like a normal book. It doesn't follow the typical flow of chapters, character arcs, or narrative structure. Instead, it speaks directly to the heart, to the conscience, to the human soul. It addresses the reader like it already knows them. Like it's not just telling a story, but pulling back the curtain on everything they've ever questioned. And that's what makes it so powerful. In a world that's saturated with opinions, debates, ideologies, and philosophies, the Quran doesn't argue, it declares. It doesn't beg for your belief, it challenges your denial. It lays out the reality of this world, the reality of the next, and the reality of your own self in ways that are both terrifying and comforting at the same time. For someone who's grown up in the West, especially in a secular or non-religious environment, reading the Quran can feel like discovering a voice they didn't know they were missing. It speaks with authority, but also with compassion. It rebukes pride, but uplifts the broken. It calls out injustice, but offers forgiveness. There is a rhythm to it, a gravity in its words that resonates even with those who don't understand Arabic. And when someone does begin to understand it, even through translation, something shifts. It's not just intellectual, it's spiritual, deeply personal. People in the West are taught to think critically, to question everything, to demand evidence. Ironically, that mindset is exactly what brings many to Islam, because the Quran doesn't shy away from that. In fact, it invites it. It constantly asks the reader to reflect, to look at the heavens and the earth, to consider the precision of creation, the balance of life, the signs all around them. It challenges human arrogance, exposes the limitations of our knowledge, and makes a simple yet profound case that there is one creator, perfect in power and wisdom, and that we are his creation. That we are not here by accident, that we have a purpose, and that everything in this world points back to him. What makes the Quran different from other religious texts is how unfiltered it is. It hasn't been revised, edited, or modernized. It is preserved in its original language, letter for letter, word for over 1,400 years. No council voted on its content. No government reshaped its teachings. It remains untouched, exactly as it was revealed. And when people realize that they're reading the exact same words that were revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, over a millennium ago, something clicks. This isn't just history. It's divine communication. It's timeless truth. Another thing that draws people is how the Quran doesn't separate the sacred from the ordinary. It speaks to all aspects of life. It's not just about prayer and rituals. It speaks about justice, mercy, relationships, honesty, charity, patience, perseverance. It doesn't leave a person's soul hanging in the clouds. It grounds them in reality, gives them a framework to live with dignity, purpose, and clarity. And it does all of that while never compromising on its core message, submission to the one true God. Some verses confront the reader with intense truths. Others wrap them in mercy. Some verses feel like a call to rise. Others feel like a hand reaching out to those who've fallen. That balance is intentional. It doesn't allow the heart to become arrogant, nor does it let the sinner lose hope. It keeps pulling a person back to their center, back to God. And for people living in a world that often feels chaotic, cold, and disconnected, that sense of being anchored is life-changing. You'll often hear people who embraced Islam say that it wasn't just the logic of the religion that moved them, it was the Quran itself. There was a moment when they read a verse and felt like it was meant just for them, like it knew exactly what they were struggling with. The Quran has a way of reaching into the unseen corners of the human heart. It speaks to fear, grief, pride, doubt, longing, and love, all while pointing toward a path of submission and peace. And when that message hits the heart, no explanation is needed. People just know. This is the truth. Not because someone told them, but because their soul finally recognized the voice it had been waiting for.
I always struggle with connecting to Wi-Fi abroad, and my local carrier roaming charges were way too expensive.
When people think about what draws others to Islam, they often expect to hear about debates, books, or complex theology. But what they don't always expect is that it's often the quiet, consistent actions of ordinary Muslims that spark something deep in the hearts of observers. It's the way someone carries themselves with dignity. The way they show patience when it's easier to lash out. The way they smile, offer help, keep their word, and move through the world with a calm sense of purpose. These small acts, done not for recognition but for the sake of God, carry a weight that arguments never could. In the West, where individualism is emphasized and communities often feel fragmented, there's something magnetic about seeing people who still live by principles, who pray 5 times a day, who fast with discipline, who refuse to compromise their values no matter how much pressure they face. Many people's first real encounter with Islam is not through a book or a lecture, but through a Muslim coworker, a neighbor, a classmate. And it's not necessarily what that Muslim says, it's how they are. They notice how this person doesn't gossip when everyone else does, how they lower their gaze and respect boundaries, how they stay calm under pressure, how they give to charity quietly, how they step away during lunch to pray, how they're always there when someone needs a hand. At first, it may just be curiosity, but slowly it turns into admiration. And admiration turns into questions. Why do you do that? What keeps you so grounded? What's the meaning behind your practices? And from that, doors open. Conversations begin. Curiosity becomes a journey. In a society where people are often taught to chase their desires, the discipline of a practicing Muslim stands out. Waking up before sunrise to pray, fasting an entire month, not just from food, but from anger and bad habits. Giving part of your income to those in need, even if no one's watching. Upholding modesty in a world that celebrates excess. These actions are not easy, but it's precisely their difficulty that makes them so respected. People can tell when someone is committed to something bigger than themselves. And in a world full of performance and superficiality, sincerity is rare and powerful. The Muslim community itself is another factor that pulls people in. There is a sense of brotherhood and sisterhood that transcends race, class, and background. Whether it's in a small masjid, in a quiet town, or during Ramadan dinners where strangers become family, there is something deeply moving about the way Muslims come together, pray together, break bread together. People see this and realize it's different. That it's not just a culture, it's a connection that's rooted in shared faith, in submission to the same Creator. It's something that many in the West crave deeply, a sense of belonging, of unity, of purpose beyond the self. And even when Muslims fall short, as all people do, the sincerity in trying to live a principled life still resonates. Many people are tired of empty words. They're tired of seeing religious talk with no follow through. But when they see someone who isn't perfect, but who keeps trying, who constantly turns back to God, who admits when they're wrong and seeks to grow, that's powerful. That's human. That's relatable. And that's inspiring in a world that often says, do whatever you want as long as it feels good, but never explains what happens when that doesn't work. You'll find countless stories of people who came to Islam not because of some viral video or dramatic event, but because of one consistent Muslim in their life. A friend who never judged but always showed integrity. A colleague who handled hardship with grace. A stranger who helped without expecting thanks. These moments plant seeds. And when life gets heavy, and it always does, people remember those examples. They remember the calm in the storm, the peace in prayer, the kindness that didn't ask for recognition. And they begin to wonder what's behind it. What gives them that strength, that peace, that light? That's when they start looking deeper. And what they find is not a person, not a personality, but a way of life rooted in something much bigger than any individual. They find Islam. Not because it was sold to them, but because they saw it lived. And sometimes that's all it takes. A good Muslim living with intention can be the dawah this world didn't know it needed.
If you're tired of gray hair making you look older than you are, watch this. If you're still using traditional box dyes, keep watching.
There's something deep inside every human being that knows when something is true. It's not always loud. It doesn't always come with lightning and thunder. Sometimes it's just a quiet feeling in the chest, a calm knowing that settles into the heart when truth is heard. Islam calls this the fitrah, the natural state, the pure internal compass every human is born with. It's not taught by society. It's not shaped by culture. It's placed in us by the Creator. And no matter how far someone drifts, no matter how much noise they surround themselves with, that fitrah never completely dies. It waits. It whispers. And when the truth of Islam reaches it, something clicks. It feels like remembering something you didn't know you'd forgotten. In the West, people are constantly being pulled in 1,000 directions, told what to believe, how to live, what to chase, what to worship. Some worship money, some worship fame, some worship their desires, their image, their intellect. The world teaches people to build their identity on anything but the truth. But even with all that noise, when they encounter Islam, pure, unfiltered, unapologetic Islam, it speaks to something beyond the mind. It speaks to the soul. Because Islam doesn't just tell people what to do, it tells them why they exist. It answers the deepest questions that have haunted human beings since the beginning of time. Who created me? Why am I here? What happens after I die? And not only does it answer them, it answers them in a way that fits, not just logically, but spiritually. That's the pull of the fitrah. When someone hears the call to prayer for the first time and their heart feels something they can't explain. When they see a Muslim placing their forehead on the ground in humility and a part of them recognizes the truth of that submission. When they read a verse from the Quran and it feels like it was written just for them. That's the fitrah responding. That's the soul recognizing its source. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as a moment of clarity in the middle of a sleepless night. A moment when everything else fades and the soul whispers, this is what I've been searching for. What's powerful about this is that it shows that faith doesn't always have to be taught. Sometimes it just has to be uncovered. People in the West aren't turning to Islam because they want to change cultures or rebel against their roots. They're turning to Islam because it speaks to the root of who they are. It doesn't ask them to become something foreign. It asks them to become what they were always meant to be. Islam isn't an addition to the self, it's a return to the self. The real self. The self that remembers God. The self that craves peace. The self that wants to live with purpose. This is why so many people, after accepting Islam, say the same thing: it feels like I've come home. That sense of home isn't about geography or family background. It's about alignment. When the soul finds what it was made for, everything else falls into place. There's a peace that comes with that alignment, a peace that can't be found in distractions or indulgence or temporary highs. It's a peace that comes from knowing the one who made you and finally understanding what he wants from you. What's even more beautiful is that this return to fitra can happen at any age, at any stage of life. For some, it happens after years of questioning. For others, after one moment of crisis. For others, still, it's a gradual unfolding. But no matter how it begins, the destination is the same, a state of peace, of submission, of clarity. Islam doesn't have to be sold. It doesn't need flashy packaging. All it needs is to be heard with an open heart. And when it reaches that heart, the fitrah recognizes it instantly, like a key finding its lock, like a lost traveler recognizing the road home. This is why Islam continues to spread quietly, steadily, powerfully in the West. Not because of marketing, not because of numbers, but because of that deep internal pull, that natural instinct inside the human being that knows truth when it sees it. You can cover the fitrah. You can ignore it. You can drown it in noise, but you can't erase it. And when it finally wakes up, when it sees Islam for what it really is, it doesn't hesitate. It returns. Because deep down, it always knew the way back.
I imagine